Okay. Next up, we have the elf who likes to be humiliated. It's got a couple other titles. Um, Punishing my pet slave elf. Obviously, this is an 18 plus series that started in 2021 actually, and it's published on TopToon. And there is an English version on TopToon Plus. I'll read the quick description. Basically, a wealthy lord. It takes place in a fantasy world, and this wealthy lord buys an elf to be used as a sex slave. However, elves are creatures that, or well, beings that develop extreme levels of magic as they grow older, and so he thought he was getting, like a 20-odd-year-old elf, but instead he gets a 250-year-old elf, and it's a very interesting. It's super interesting because basically, she is blackmailing the main character into doing BDSM with her, sort of like BDSM play, because she's strong enough to break the enslavement magic that has been cast on her, and she can heal all her injuries instantly, etc., etc. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's clearly porn. You shouldn't, it's porn, so how great can it be? I would say that this is actually mostly plot with porn added on. There's actually, relative to the number of chapters, I'd say the amount of nudity and sexual content, or the amount of, explicitly sexual content is relatively low compared to all the other stuff going on with it. So, let's talk about the characters. So, we've got Theorad, who's the lord. He's the male lead. He's really interesting because I really like the fact that he's actually genuinely a good person, and he's not doing any of it because he wants to, or because he enjoys it. So he doesn't enjoy torturing the elf. He doesn't enjoy belittling his fiance. He doesn't enjoy any of it. And he spends most of his time trying to keep the elf happy, and also to be able to make sure that his relationship with his fiance doesn't collapse. I think out of this kind of category of main character, I honestly like him a lot. I think he's a really interesting character from that perspective, because he's constantly thinking about what can I do to make sure that everyone ends up okay on the far side of whatever this elf is trying to get me to do. The elf doesn't have a name, or rather she refuses to say what her name is. She does have some aliases, but in general, everyone just calls her the elf. She's interesting. She's got a backstory that seems pretty deep in detail. I mean, it's deep and detailed because she's 250 years old, but we don't know a ton about her, apart from the fact that she really doesn't like the fact that men lust after her, and the reason that she's into Theorad is because he's super not lusting after her. She has to coerce him into everything, basically, which is an interesting dynamic to have, where you've got this person who supposedly wants to be the she wants to be the bottom of the relationship, but she's actually, it's a really interesting situation because she's the top, but she's a masochist, and Theorad is the bottom, but he's neither sadist nor masochist. He's like, I'd like romance and that sort of thing. She's got some cool magic she does. She's got some interesting character traits. I think it's really neat the way that she flip-flops between appearing she's got her I'm with Theorad face, we're doing our thing, versus her outward appearance as a slave, and she puts on this ridiculous act of, oh, I'm so pitiful, the master just uses me for my body, blah blah blah, which is fundamentally inaccurate in terms of who's using whom and that sort of thing. So yeah, really interesting. Then there's the Therad's fiance, who is one of my favorite characters. Just period. She's got a lot of depth. She wants to marry Therad. She and Therad are like into each other. They want to be married, even though there's like a political alliance thing going on where it's happening for political reasons. They're both in love with each other. She loves and respects him. He loves and respects her, and it's a very nice. It's a really nice dichotomy, or not dichotomy, but a very nice words. It's a very nice relationship because there's mutual understanding and respect, and she picks up on the fact that he's being blackmailed by the elf, and is like, and puts on like an act with him as well, trying to prevent the elf from figuring out that that she knows that the elf is using Therad. And so yeah, Ashley is great. Like they really, she and Therad really like mesh nicely. Like you could see why they would be a cute married couple if the elf weren't there. So yeah, they're the primary characters. There's some ancillary characters who make sort of, you can't say it's like a one-off appearance, but they don't have strong appearances. So at least the three main, what you might call the three main characters, have some layers and depth to them, which is really nice. So, I'm gonna go with a 4.9 on the characters thing, and even like the ancillary characters all have something going on under the surface, which is kind of cool. And the world building is like very interesting so far. Story/plot, obviously, it's got that pornographic quality to it. So if that's not your cup of tea, you could theoretically like skip through most of it, apart from certain specific pieces of dialogue, and it would still be an interesting story in and of itself. It's basically Therad's struggle. Like Therad, after the elf is introduced to his estate, Therad goes and finds out how dangerous. Like he learns how dangerous the elf actually is, and is spending all of his time trying to make sure that everyone doesn't die by appeasing her in various ways. And honestly, like, it's really well done. I'm gonna give it a 4.9 as well, just because it's very compelling. Let's put it that way. Like, it's shockingly compelling, and like I said, it's more plot than porn thus far. I mean, it's still ongoing. There's 38 chapters out, I believe. So it'll be worth a revisit later on. Consistency/art. So I have to, I want to give it a 5 because the backgrounds are incredibly lush and detailed, and there's just so much, for something that is essentially that you would dismiss as smut, it's amazingly beautiful. It's really well executed. There's a handful of times where the art looks a little bit off, and by handful I mean very, very irregularly it looks off. But overall, it's really gorgeous. If you look at the rooms the characters are in and stuff like that. One of the most crazy things is in these recent chapters that you can see paintings on the walls, and these paintings are all pre-Georgian Renaissance era paintings. They're just chilling out on the walls, but they don't reuse the same one over and over again. They're all different paintings. If it's in this correct part of the room, it's the same painting, but if it's in a different part of the room, it's a different painting. It just blew my mind. There's just this level of detail and amazingness to it that I really appreciate. So it's got really great art. So I'm gonna give it a 4.9 just because there's a handful of instances where it's not tip top, but otherwise it's gorgeous. I really like it. Let's see, pacing. The pacing is pretty good. It's Not too fast, not too slow. There's some interesting asides and that sort of thing. I think the pacing is probably the weakest element in this one, just because like some things have a lot more time devoted to them than others. So I'd give it I'm gonna say like a 4.5. Like it's decent, like it's very readable, but the pacing is off compared to the rest of it. Yeah, and so Flair, I'm giving it a 5. The reason for that, it should be pretty obvious. There's just so much extra about it. Like, if you are into the sort of the pornhwa type thing, you've got your classic smut stuff, which is titillating. The characters look decent or whatever, but there's not like a lot of extra artistry thrown in there. This is like the opposite. There's a ton of extra artistry in it. There's interesting world building. There's just all this really cool extra stuff going on in the background that I really enjoy. Like there's a logic and a consistency to it that's very enjoyable, and obviously the art being so lush and detailed. It's just detailed in ways that it doesn't need to be detailed. Like in the middle of a scene of lovemaking, the background's not all whited out. Like it's the room. You can see the room. There's a clock on the wall, right? There's all this stuff. The wallpaper is all that. Well, not the. I mean, sometimes there's wallpaper, but the details are all still there. The curtains hanging from the edge of the bed, all that sort of thing. So I highly approve of it. It's certainly one of the things that I'm enjoying reading this season. And I rate it when I generously gave it a 10, just on the rating scale. I think if it continues to have this quality, it'll be a definite read for people who don't mind 18 plus content. And so overall, I give it a 4.84. Based on all of those attributes, highly worth it. Do read it if you don't mind that plus 18 content. But yeah, it's great. I'm obviously recommending it a lot, but it's really good. Like it's just really well done. And maybe I'm biased because I've read a whole, but I went on a whole kick where I just started reading a whole bunch of stuff from this sort of genre of manhwa. So it could be that. Oh, I forgot to mention the author's name. So bear with me because I suck at Korean. So the author is Sa-yuk Siljang. So I assume it's Siljang Sa-yuk in Korean order with the family name, but I'm not 100%. And the artist is Canape, all caps with no acute accent on the E. But yeah, it's there's an official translation and official raw. Where is the? I'm having a brain fart about where to buy it. Oh, it's on TopTune. That's right. I think I mentioned that already. So yeah, it's totally great. Yeah, super interesting. Like the I think the key is that the world building is interesting, the art is gorgeous and lush, and the dynamic between the elf and Therad is really good. It's very interesting. It's like it's comedy because no one dies, but you could see how people would die. Yeah. Anyway, so there's that one. Please check it out.